One thing that's important to mention is stress isn't necessarily a bad thing. In fact, a lack of stress can lead to poor physical and mental performance. However, having too much stress, especially if it's chronic, it's going to crush your mood, it's going to crush your physical health, it's going to crush your productivity as well. And if you do that long enough and stay in that place long enough, you're going to be experiencing burnout. And that can take a long time to recover from.
Welcome to the Legendary Life Podcast, where it's all about taking control of your health, losing fat, transforming your body, and living the life you deserve with celebrity fitness trainer and longevity enthusiast, Ted Rice. You've heard the news. A few weeks ago, Silicon Valley Bank bit the dust, making it the biggest U.S. bank failure since the 2008 financial crisis. And it's got a lot of people in a panic. People are thinking, what the heck is going on? What caused this total meltdown? What does this mean for the rest of the economy? And perhaps most importantly, you're thinking what it means for your future finances. Now listen, if you listen to the show, you already know that I'm not exactly an expert on complicated economic systems. But when it comes to dealing with stress, understanding stress, and performing your best during stressful times, well, that's something I can chat to you about. And that's what we're going to get into today. So I'm going to be talking about 5 things that you can do right away to make yourself more resilient to stress so that you perform at a high level. What is up, my friend? Welcome to the Legendary Life Podcast. I'm your host, Ted Rice, health expert and coach to entrepreneurs, founders, and other high-performing professionals. The reason we do this show is twofold. Number one, I want to give you the best health and fitness information on the internet. I've been in this business for 24 years now, as of 2023, February of 2023. And I made a lot of mistakes and I didn't have the big picture of health and the different, let's say, buckets of health that affect your overall performance and well-being. And the second reason is after implementing some of what you learn on this show, I know some of you, the founders, the high performers, the doctors, the veterinarians, the attorneys, you're going to want someone to help you fast track your results with your health and fitness. And I want you to think about me when that becomes the case, or if that becomes the case for you. Now let's dive into today's episode. And before I get to those 5 strategies, I want to talk about a few things that are really important to set the stage for talking about stress, talking about the strategies that we're going to be discussing. I read this article from NPR. It was titled, "What to Know About the Silicon Valley Bank Collapse, Takeover, and Fallout." And what it was, it basically described how the Silicon Valley Bank, it went and put a lot of its money, like billions of dollars, into long-term US Treasury bonds. And Treasury bonds, if you're into investing, you know, they're usually seen as a safe bet. But here's the deal. You can't pull out your money out of the Treasury bonds early. They have to mature. Otherwise, if interest rates go up, the bonds decrease in value. And guess what? That's exactly what happened. Not a huge deal, but the whole tech sector started going south and people started to panic, which is what we're going to be talking about today, how to control this panic. And we're going to be talking about stress and how it's contagious even. So companies began taking their deposits out of the bank, and to cover those withdrawals, Silicon Valley Bank had to sell those bonds at a heavy loss. And this news freaked out the bank's clients who took even more money out. Now, I've never heard of Silicon Valley Bank before. I bank with Chase. I'm not a guy who's on top of what's happening in Silicon Valley or what's happening in banking. But I do get the idea that if I put my money with Chase, if I took all my money out of Chase and all the other clients of Chase took their money out all at the same time, Chase would go out of business, even though it's one of the biggest banks around. So that's what happened, but it gets even worse there's other banks that had similar risk profiles to Silicon Valley Bank, and their stock prices started to drop too. And that got people worried, again, stressed that that these other banks would end up experiencing the same fate. And so they started to take their money out of these other banks. It kind of started like there was a quote that I want to share with you. A Morgan Stanley bank analyst said the difficulties that Silicon Valley Bank was experiencing were highly idiosyncratic and shouldn't be viewed and read across to other regional banks. In other words, this is an isolated situation. It's not the whole banking, the banking system collapsing. All right. And another analyst from Wells Fargo's said it's really just fear that has gripped the market, and it's sort of self-perpetuating at this point. So listen, maybe you're an expert on the economy, markets, banking, and maybe you understand this stuff. I don't. But what I want to tell you is this. I do understand stress. I do understand peak performance. And I understand how the way I'm looking at this is there was this situation and Silicon Valley Bank had to deal with this unusual situation it found itself in due to the way it invested its money in these bonds and how people reacted to this news. And then it started spreading. So the fear gripped the market, as the Wells Fargo analyst said. And what I want to tell you is this. When stress takes over our brains, because that's really what we're talking about, it's not just your mind. Stress isn't just a feeling in your mind. It's neurochemical and systemic hormonal changes that happen that lead to very measurable physiological changes. For example, if we put a heart rate monitor, your heart rate would go up when you're feeling stressed. If we put a blood pressure monitor, your blood pressure would go up when you're stressed. If we measured your respiratory rate, in other words, how many breaths you take per minute, that would increase. If we also measured what's called galvanic skin response, which just is a fancy term for measuring sweat, which, by the way, if you've never heard of galvanic skin response, that is the most sensitive way to pick up on stress, right? So if you ever drank, it's like me today, I had sweaty palms because I drank too much coffee, which is probably every day. But anyway, that's something so we can measure the stress response. Even if you feel, oh, I'm not that stressed, we can still measure a stress response. Part of it is certainly how you view the situation, but a lot of us lack awareness, or we're disconnected from our bodies. We don't realize we're munching on our fingernails or, biting our lower lip or those types of things. So a lot of us were disconnected from those symptoms of stress. And that's why it's really important to measure stress in a more objective way. Instead of saying, hey, are you stressed? And someone's like, biting their nails all the way down to the quick. And you're saying, what do you mean? Is that's normal for you? Anyway, so it's really important to have a more objective understanding of stress. So let's talk about that. And the really one thing that's important to mention is stress isn't necessarily a bad thing. In fact, a lack of stress can lead to poor physical and mental performance. However, having too much stress, especially if it's chronic, it's going to crush your mood. It's going to crush your physical health. It's going to crush your productivity as well. And if you do that long enough and stay in that place long enough, you're going to be experiencing burnout. And that can take a long time to recover from. And maybe you've heard those stories before. Maybe you had that story yourself. So instead of excelling in our business or excelling in our career and also the management of our homes and our families, we end up making suboptimal decisions. We struggle to creatively solve problems, and we don't lead our teams as effectively when we're chronically stressed. And here's the thing, our brains get stressed. It's one of the things I think that modern life is let's say I'm trying to figure out how to say this properly. It's one of the constants, let's say, of modern life. Negative news, negative viral social media outrage stories, poor sleep, toxic relationships because people aren't sleeping enough and they're watching too much negative news or negative social media. And the more stress that happens, we become more fear-based and survival-oriented in our thoughts, actions, and behaviors. And I want to give you a good example of this. Now, I don't know if everyone who struggles with being overweight or obesity, it's definitely stress that's driving their behavior. But I will say this, in many cases of my clients, after working with people for 24 years, over 24 years now, one thing I've noticed is that the people who struggle the most, and when I look at the clients who I've worked with who've struggled, and especially the ones that have worked with me for many months or perhaps even years, I can see their weight follows their stress. So in other words, they're feeling great, they're losing weight. They're feeling bad, they're feeling stressed, got a lot on their plate, too much on their plate, the weight goes up. And that's just one example of many of how stress can affect you and affect your health. And I want to make this clear because you'll hear other influencers on social media incorrectly. I mean, this is 100% wrong. No arguments here, okay? 100% wrong. They'll say, oh, when you're stressed, stress raises cortisol. Cortisol makes you fat, even if you're not eating that many calories. That is not a reality. That's like saying stress makes you broke, even when you're not spending more money. Okay. What it really is going on here is you start to feel stressed. Sometimes you feel like having a drink or 2 or 5, you start to skip your workouts, you stay up later than you should, you eat more than you should, and you're not going to the superfood salad. You are eating something that is delicious because the pleasure from delicious food, it's more reducing in stress. So let's be real. That's what happens. Our behavior changes. And the other thing about this is we don't even realize it. For example, I was dealing with a client of mine and he was convinced that something was wrong with him physiologically. He's like, I'm not eating that much food, but I'm starting to gain weight. I'm really stressed. I'm starting to gain weight, but I'll tell you, I'm not eating that much food. And I said, okay, so let me ask you, how many calories did you eat last week? Because in my program, I help all my clients get to the point where they're tracking their calories. And he told me, well, I'm not tracking right now because I'm really stressed. I'm like, okay, cool. No problem. You don't need to track. But how about this? What did you eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner 5 days ago? No idea. Exactly. He was telling me that he was sure that he wasn't overeating, but yet couldn't even tell me. He wasn't tracking, so he had no record of the calorie content or the calories he was eating daily or weekly, and he couldn't even remember the meals. So that's the type of bullshit that we tell ourselves sometimes. And I'm saying that with love because I've done it to myself. I've been in that case, although I'm not there anymore. But those are the types of things that can happen. So stress not only drives it drives you to change your behavior, but it also affects your memory. So you're not on top of what you're even doing. You don't remember the fact that you've had 3 handfuls of M&Ms or ate that trail mix or had 5 drinks when you thought it was only 2 or 3, whatever the situation is, whatever your situation is. So that's really what's going on with stress and how it affects weight gain and how it affects your ability to even manage or be aware of your own behavior. So when you're feeling the heat, there's also a time or let's say an opportunity where you can really shine. Okay. You can come up with all sorts of fresh ideas and tackle problems and get in shape. You can rise to the challenge if you understand what I'm going to share with you right now. And I want to tell you, when people are stressed and they're looking at what's happening with Silicon Valley Bank and seeing some of the fallout from it or some of the ripple effect from it, and they don't understand what's going on, people need your leadership. So what I want to talk about now, how do you sustain focus, productivity during times of chaos and uncertainty? Because if you can do that, then you will be successful no matter what. One thing I learned from my clients working with very high net worth individuals, mostly men and guys who had Ferrari collections, and one of their Ferraris was worth $8 million. Those types of people, is that during a downturn, during a time like we're experiencing, there's always opportunities no matter what. There's always opportunities no matter what. So whether you have a Ferrari collection or you don't even have a car, regardless of the situation, you can perform at a higher level too. But I want to tell you something. If you don't embrace what I'm talking about here, if you fall prey to the fear mongering and the doom scrolling, you will fail. You will make worse decisions. You will do things that will make you unhealthier. It will make you maybe physically unhealthier, maybe psychologically unhealthier. Your relationships will suffer. So to increase your chances of success, regardless of external conditions, what I want you to do is focus on these things that I'm going to share with you now. Number one, daily exercise. You've probably heard that exercise is a powerful tool for lowering stress. And if you're like most of our clients, you're already in a consistent routine of exercise. But most people exercise because of burning calories or looking better. And it's viewed that way. A lot of my high-performing clients, they stop when they're stressed, they stop exercising. And what I want to tell you right now is that is the exact opposite of what you need to do. You need to double down on your commitment to exercise. You don't need to double down on the time, but doubling down on the commitment to exercise. Why? Well, here's why. First, when you exercise, your body releases feel-good chemicals like endorphins, endocannabinoids, and dopamine. These chemicals are what gives you that runner's high. Even if you're not running, I don't run, but I did the bike today and I did a few intervals at the end of my cardio session. I felt on top of the world after that. What is that feeling of being on top of the world? It's these chemicals that are going on or being released. And besides the euphoria-inducing brain chemicals, exercise increases blood flow to your brain. What does that do? Well, it brings nutrients to your brain. Your brain needs nutrients just like every other important organ in your body, and more of them get to your brain when your circulation is improved. What does that look like? What are the results? Well, how about improved cognitive function? And how about the reduced impact of stress on your brain? For example, exercise has been shown to reduce the number of stress hormone receptors in a part of your brain known as the hippocampus. And if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, I've talked about the hippocampus a lot. The hippocampus, it's a really fascinating part of our brain. It's critical in the role of regulating stress. And it's also, we found, or science is starting to realize, that people who have a smaller hippocampus are more susceptible to experiencing PTSD. And we've also learned that PTSD, by the way, post-traumatic stress disorder, it's an extreme form of stress. That's all it is. So back to my point is that we've also started to learn that PTSD shrinks your hippocampus. The extreme level of stress shrinks your hippocampus. But here's the thing. Exercising can, especially aerobic exercise, by the way, it can reduce the receptors that bind to stress hormones in your brain. So that means the stress doesn't affect your brain as much because there's nothing to connect to it. A hormone needs to connect to an area of your body, like testosterone needs to bind to muscles, as an example. So the stress hormone, cortisol, can't bind to your hippocampus. So another thing happens, exercise is, again, especially aerobic exercise, has been shown to increase levels of something called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF. Now, BDNF is critical for the growth and maintenance of brain cells, especially the ones involved in learning, memory, and cognitive function. So exercise is doing all these things. And what I love about this is I want to shift exercise away from, oh, I'm burning some calories right now. Oh, I'm making up for that cheeseburger that I ate the other day. Or if it's in my case, I ate a delicious pizza the other night. Now, it does burn calories. I don't want to say it doesn't, but it's not the best reason to exercise. And certainly your diet is a much more impactful way of fat loss. Exercise isn't that impressive when it comes to fat loss, at least by itself. However, exercise is so impressive in the way it helps us with our brain health and become more resilient to stress by increasing blood flow to our brain, making more BDNF, and reducing the number of stress hormone receptors. This leads you to feel more relaxed, focused, and energized, and better able to handle the challenges that come your way. Now, the second thing I want to talk about is sleep optimization. And we've talked a lot about sleep over the years, but I want to briefly mention it in the context of stress, because some of us, we lose sleep when we're stressed. We can't turn our minds off at night. We also tend to stay up a little bit later because binge watching Netflix at night just feels better than going to bed on time for some reason, right? At least in my situation. Maybe you can relate. But here's the thing. Getting great quality sleep is crucial for lowering stress levels. Here's why. When we sleep, our bodies go through a series of important processes that help repair and rejuvenate our cells and tissues. That includes regulating hormones like cortisol, your stress hormone. And when we don't get enough good quality sleep, our cortisol levels can become imbalanced. More specifically, they can become higher. That can lead to an increase in stress and anxiety. This can also lead to a decrease in your ability to cope with stressors. So not only do you feel more stress and anxiety just walking around under no additional stress, but when there becomes a more stressful situation at work or at home, you're not handling it well. So conversely, when you get enough good quality sleep, your body's able to regulate cortisol levels more effectively, and you just feel better. So getting a good night is good too. Getting good quality sleep every night also improves your overall physical and mental health. And that makes you more resilient to stress. So if you're feeling stressed out, one of the best things you can do, prioritize good quality sleep. Now, again, I've done a lot of training on sleep. Just go to legendarylifepodcast.com and type in sleep in the search on the website. It'll bring up a lot of articles and episodes about sleep. But the short of it is aim for at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night. Make sure you're creating a sleep environment that's cool, dark, and quiet. So, for example, is it pitch dark in your bedroom? Is it cool in your bedroom? Is it quiet? And just by doing those few things, and also is your bed good quality? Are your pillows comfortable? By taking care of your sleep, you can lower your stress levels and improve your overall well-being. Now, the third thing I wanted to talk about is something that I've gotten into more recently. And the third thing is schedule deep work. One of the things that can happen when your stress levels are up is that you're trying to get things done, but you don't feel like you get much done, even in a 6 or 8 hour workday. And I want to tell you straight up, I want to be super honest with you and tell you this is something I've been struggling with. Now, I'm not under a lot of stress, so I don't want to blow it out of proportion. I'm in a good situation. My business is doing well. but I still struggle with deep work. And I guess my stress is coming from learning how to be a CEO in my own business, learning how to manage a business better instead of just being a great coach. It's a very different skill set, as I'm sure you're aware. Running a business, if you're an attorney or a doctor or anything but an entrepreneur, and you've had to learn the business side of things, it's completely, different than your expertise. Now, if you're an entrepreneur, this is your expertise. So you're probably laughing at me and the rest of us, or at least shaking your head and feeling bad for us. But I've had to learn, how do I do deep work? Not when I'm coaching clients. I don't have a problem. I'm in the zone when I coach clients. I'm in the zone when I do interviews. I'm in the zone when I'm doing an episode like this. But what's hard is when I'm creating the content that we put up on social media or doing some of the other things, other tasks for my business. It's so easy for me to get distracted, especially because I spend a lot of time on social media. And social media, if you spend time like I do, you can go on to Twitter or Facebook or Instagram because you're just going to do that one thing or get back to someone. And all of a sudden you're scrolling. You're like, what am I doing? 10 minutes just went by. So deep work is the antidote to that. If you've never heard of deep work is defined as focused, uninterrupted work that requires cognitive effort. And Cal Newport wrote an entire book on it. I highly recommend his book if you haven't read it already. And what I'm telling you here is engaging in deep work will lower your stress levels. Here's why. When you're working deeply on a task, you're completely absorbed in what you're doing. You get into a flow state, which is a state of complete focus and immersion in the task at hand. So, for example, before I was recording this episode, I was writing the article that goes along with this episode. I was in a flow state, but every time if I didn't set my phone to the side or, tell people, hey, listen, I'm working right now, please don't interrupt me, I'll constantly be distracted. So what I'm trying to tell you is the more time you can spend in flow, the better you're going to feel. Because when you're in that flow state, your brain produces, kind of like when you're exercising, feel-good neurotransmitters like dopamine. These can help reduce stress levels. Aside from that, deep work can help you feel a sense of accomplishment, which can boost your confidence and reduce feelings of stress and anxiety too, because getting things done makes you feel good. And going the whole day and feeling like, what did I even do today? I looked at my email inbox. I returned a few emails. I got back to some people, and I really didn't move the needle when it comes to my work at all. That's really defeating. So deep work can also help you feel more in control of your time and your workload. And by setting goals and working intentionally, you can prioritize your most important tasks. You can lower distractions, which are very stressful, and you can get shit done. So if you're feeling stressed out and you're feeling distracted, start to schedule deep work in your day. You'll be surprised at how much it can help you feel better about when you do work. And it's something I'm going to be talking more about. I'm not an expert at it. I am just starting to adopt these deep work habits. It's very easy for me to get out of deep work or to get I love being distracted, or at least my brain loves being distracted. But it's something that I wanted to share with you today because it's something I'm personally working on and something that I certainly will get more into and will have some people on the show. But if you're looking for something to dive a bit deeper into deep work, check out Cal Newport's book, Deep Work. Now, the fourth thing I wanted to talk about is something I practiced for a long time and something I continue practicing: reducing negative inputs. For example, I started this episode talking about I've never heard of Silicon Valley Bank. There's a reason why. Not that Silicon Valley Bank or paying attention to the economy is negative, but I reduce my inputs. I don't know what's going on a lot of the time. And this helps you to manage your stress levels. Here's why. The constant stream of negative news and information that we're exposed to on social media and in the news can trigger feelings of anxiety, fear, and helplessness. Oh, the world's so horrible. Oh my gosh, what's happening? Oh, everything's out of control. The whole world's out of control. Listen, I've traveled around the world. I've been to so many different countries. I've seen the history of Cambodia, of Thailand, of Malaysia, of Brazil, of so many places in the world. I'm in Portugal right now. People have been doing horrible things in Portugal for 900 years, right? And I don't mean, I'm not attacking the country or anything like that. I'm just pointing out that our history is filled with negative stories. Certainly, you can make an argument that we're in a very different situation today, but the truth is that we're also in a different situation because I remember when you had to wait for the paper to be printed because there wasn't a 24 news channel, a 24/7 news channel. Then the 24/7 news channels became a thing, came into existence. And now you don't even have to wait for the news for like an hour to go by for that show to come on to tell you about the world events. You know right away, 5 seconds after it happens, because someone made a tweet about it or someone posted about it on Facebook or Instagram or made a TikTok video. I'm not on TikTok, but I'm sure they're doing that too, right? So limiting your exposure to doom and gloom and just social media in general and negative news especially, it can help you lower your stress levels, because what happens is this. Let's say you see something. Let's say it's a video out of context. Maybe something violent or some injustice or something very scary happening, a natural disaster. How do you feel watching that? Do you feel good? Does it bring a smile to your face? No. It elicits a stress response. Again, if we were measuring your heart rate and breathing rate, blood pressure, galvanic skin response, etc., we'd see a stress response happening from viewing that negative or from viewing that very challenging video, even though what you might be watching might be half the world away in a country you've never been to before and maybe will never visit in your entire life, but yet it's stressing you out now. So limiting your exposure is crucial. Here's what I want to tell you to do. Mute, unfollow, or block people who are putting out negative information or stress. Let's not say negative, let's say stress-inducing information or posts, because there's a little bit of a tangent here I want to dive into that I think is relevant. One of the things that's happened in our current environment is that, and I used to do this, so I'm a little bit guilty. I apologize. I didn't know what I was doing when I first got on social media, but I knew that if I said something really triggering, if I made a political statement, which, I don't do, but I have in the past, it gets people going. You can say, hey, exercise is really good for you. Make sure you do it every day. Crickets. But if you say something about a politician or make hey, we should impose sugar taxes on, so you make some political statement, people you've never interacted with before on social media, they'll be arguing with you, agreeing with you, and it just gets out of control. And marketers know this. And I saw this the other day. Someone just yesterday, because my Twitter kind of changed. They started showing me accounts that I don't follow. And I saw this video. Is very triggering. I don't even remember what it was. But after the triggering video, I think it was some violence, right? And after the triggering video, the second tweet was, hey, buy my t-shirt. It was literally that. And that's how marketers are taking advantage of social media right now. So people, it's not just negative news channels, it's marketers who are putting negative information out because negative information seems to go more viral than positive information. And then they plug their service or product after, and you are stressed out and you don't know why. It's because you watched all this negative stuff. So by taking control and blocking those people, unfollowing those people, and even going so far as to use an app that blocks social media access can help you be more focused with your time, reduce your feelings of stress because you're reducing the amount of stressful stimuli that you're being exposed to. I know that was a lot, but it's really important to realize that's part of our current environment right now, our current digital environment, let's say. Now, the fifth one is really near and dear to my heart. If you've ever seen me put up photos of scuba diving with bull sharks or going or scuba diving in caves or jumping out of planes, this is why I do it. Stress inoculation training. So maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't, but it's what the military uses to build resilience in their soldiers. So here's how it works. First, you learn to recognize the signs and symptoms of stress, some of what we already talked about. Now, if you're not wearing a Fitbit or an Apple Watch, maybe you don't see that you have an increased heart rate, but that's something if you do have those wearables, that's something you can check. But if you find yourself, your shoulders are up by your ears, for example, or you're finding yourself kind of clenching your jaw, or maybe you're shallow breathing and you have racing thoughts, those are all some examples of increased stress or signs and symptoms of stress. Now, the next thing you learn are managing symptoms for stress. For example, you can even do this if you're driving right now. What I want you to do, let's take 5 deep breaths together. So 1, in through your nose, and out through your mouth. 2. And let's stop on 3 because we don't even need to do 5. Now, I wasn't feeling particularly stressed, but I'll tell you, after taking those 3 deep breaths, I feel less stressed. So let's talk about progressive muscle relaxation. For example, is just scan your body really quick. And you can, again, even do this while you're driving. It'll help you not be so tense while you drive. For example, I'm thinking of my trapezius muscle. In other words, the neck muscles that run from your cervical spine, your neck, in other words, all the way to your shoulders, right? That place we love to get massaged when someone's massaging our neck and shoulders. So just kind of feel in there and maybe kind of relax, maybe breathe, take another deep breath, and try to let that tension go a little bit. So we experienced deep breathing. Now we've done some progressive muscle relaxation. And there's also something that I like called cognitive reframing. For example, I tell myself, you know what? There's a solution here. I'm stressed right now. I feel like nothing I'm doing is working, but there is a solution. I just need to find it. And also there's someone that can help me solve this solution, that solve this problem. There's someone who has a solution here. And of course, with my business, I've got a business coach, so I just send him a voice message. So anyway, after you learn a few techniques, let's say right now you're not in a particularly stressed situation, but think about stressful situations that you do get into. You want to make sure you practice these situations now when you're not feeling stressed. For example, you can practice this deep breathing anytime while you're driving. When I used to drive, I don't even have a car right now. I like not having a car. I love cars. I miss my BMW. But you know what? I'm really enjoying not having a car. But I used to drive around in Miami Beach from client to client, and I would get stressed in traffic. There are a lot of tourists in Miami Beach. The traffic sucks anyway. And I would constantly be deep breathing. Every time I felt myself getting a bit more tense, I would deep breathe. And again, you can practice the muscle relaxation. Start practicing these things under circumstances that maybe have a little bit of stress, or maybe they're low stress, but they're easy to implement. And then once you've developed some proficiency there, that's when you try them out in real life situations. So for example, let's say you have children and one of your kids is really losing it. and it makes you want to really lose it. Now, I'm not a dad yet, but I can only imagine some of the grief that I created for my parents when I was losing control and how they had to work to maintain their cool. So if you're a parent and I'm sure every parent must lose it, I would think. Maybe not every parent, but I would imagine that a lot of parents, you get to a point, maybe in sleep so well, like some of what we talked about, you got to lose it. So those are the times where you want to try those out, but you must do a bit of practicing before. But you want to bring those techniques into real life situations. Another example, and this is something when I'm arguing with someone I'm dating, that's a situation where making sure I'm relaxing my muscles and not getting more stressed and not breathing more tense and holding my breath, because that's going to increase the stress in the situation and decrease my ability to handle it. Because if you're dating someone or you're married with someone, I'm going to assume that you really like the person. So you don't want to hurt the person or say something hurtful to the person that you're with. You want to, but you still have an issue with them that needs to be discussed. So what you want to do is implement these techniques during those situations, again, after you've practiced in a low stress environment. And that way you can bring it into those stressful situations and handle them better so that you can be at your best. And I don't know how good of a job I'm explaining stress inoculation, but let me tell you something. This is the key to managing stress. And we've just talked about a few things. There are so many other cool ways that we can handle stress and build our resilience to stress. Again, we're not going to talk about bull shark diving and some of the other crazy things that I do, but it makes you more resilient to stress. So if you've never heard about stress inoculation training and you were intrigued about this, I'm going to have some information coming out on it soon. But this is one of the best things you can do if you're already sleeping decently, if you're already exercising, if you're not participating in the social media and negative news drama. This is something that can take you to the next level. So that's it for me. Just to recap briefly, the 5 ways to become more resilient to stress is 1, daily exercise, 2, sleep optimization, 3, scheduled deep work, 4, reducing negative inputs, and 5, stress inoculation training. And in conclusion here, I want to ask you, which one of these resonates with you most? Which one do you feel like you need to start doing or do more of? And the reason I ask is because for you to get the best results, you need to think about your specific situation and what you're already doing. As an example, I don't need to exercise more. I exercise almost every day for about an hour. So exercising 2 hours isn't going to be the best use of my time. Instead, focusing on deep work, like I mentioned, I shared some personal stories about my struggles with deep work and how I'm working on it. That makes me feel great. In fact, I feel so good right now that I've written this freaking article that was very difficult to write, and also recording it in a way that I feel good about. I feel like I'm winning my day right now. So the second thing would be stress inoculation. I haven't been doing things that make me more resilient to stress. I haven't done that for a few months, so I need to get back into it. And if you're not sure which strategy would be most helpful for you, that's okay too. Experiment with different techniques and pay attention to what works best. And by taking the time to find what works for you and being results oriented in your process, you can successfully level up and become that leader that we need right now, that the people in your life or your business, your family, that's what they need right now. Hope you enjoy this, and I'll speak to you next time.
Are you a busy professional who's crushing it in your career or in growing your business, but you're struggling to lose weight and transform your body while fitting in your social life as well as your work obligations? If the answer is yes, well, let me help you get into the best shape of your life while thriving in your business. Go to legendarylifepodcast.com/apply and schedule a 15-minute strategy call with me today.